Hi, everybody. I'm excited to be here today. My name is Libby Leist. I am a board member at the Headstrong organization, and it is my great pleasure to be here with Jim McDonough, the new executive director for Headstrong. Hi, Jim.
Hi, Libby. Good morning. Thanks for doing this.
It's certainly unusual that we're meeting this way virtually, but we wanted to give everybody an opportunity to meet you and to hear much of your story. And, I believe you've been on the job for about 24 hours
Yeah, yes. Yeah.
at the time of this recording. So I'll ask you all about your experience so far. But we figured that in this virtual world, it would be a nice opportunity for people to be able to tune in and hear a little bit about you and your vision for this organization. So why don't you start off, Jim, by telling us a little bit about your backstory and how you came to Headstrong?
Sure. And thanks. And hello, everybody. I'm Jim McDonough, the new executive director for Headstrong. And thank you, Libby, for doing this for us today. So a little bit about me. I first and foremost am a veteran of the United States Armed Forces. I served 26 years on active duty in the Army, retiring at the rank of colonel. But there's a backstory there that I think it's important in letting people get to know me more than just that. First and foremost, I'm an upstate New Yorker who, in the shadows of Vietnam, had followed many of my friends' fathers growing up. I grew up in the shadows of Plattsburgh Air Force Base, and most of my friends' parents were, in fact, Air Force pilots. So, in growing up, I was always around a military culture. My dad had been a Marine during the Korean War. My uncle served in Vietnam. So, for me, part of this like early instinct of service was kind of stoked by friendships of children, with my schoolmates who had parents serving in the active military during Vietnam. So I got to see what that life was like, and I really liked it. Early on, I liked it. I thought the idea of service to my country was valuable. I certainly had a family background of doing so, and for me, it was just this thing that instinctively I was drawn to. I went to high school, Catholic high school, typical small town kid. Dad was a state trooper, mom registered nurse, had one brother, and we just lived a normal life. But following high school, putting myself through college, I was still drawn to the culture. I had toyed with the idea, in and out of the years of college of jumping right out of college and going in the Army, which I did. I literally graduated from college, enlisted, and went to officer candidate school and came out a second lieutenant. And from there, my career took off, serving 26 years around the globe, raising a family, three wonderful boys, and we had a chance to see the world and serve our country. And certainly was my upbringing. And fortunately, that was all about like when I retired it turned in this direction of staying connected. And I was drawn to further public service in government, in a nonprofit setting, some time in philanthropy, but it was always around the population I served with Libby. And it's turned into a calling. I wouldn't have called it that as I was in the middle of it, but certainly upon reflection, for me, there's a calling to all this that allows me to continue to serve the people I served with and their families.
Yeah, I mean, I think what resonates the most from hearing you is just your connection from a very young age to military families, and
Yeah.
clearly that's going to be a huge, benefit as you take on this new role. What is it? Where is that passion from? And can you share the lessons learned in your years working with families?
Yeah, I was always raised and that I exist for other people. And I'll say that very clearly that my ethos is about serving my fellow citizens of this country. And, whether it be in uniform or out, I think this idea of what do I exist for? It's to help others achieve their goals. And certainly to be a leader, the term in the military was selfless servant. I lived it, I understood it, and I really liked it. It was this thing that gives me strength when I see others succeed. Certainly, being able to lead a great organization like Headstrong is all about that. It's about empowering a culture that delivers world-class mental health treatment for people like me and our families. And the thrill of doing that and the honor of doing that is really taken from my kind of selfless servant ethos that I really do enjoy working when others succeed and being at the center of that, being alongside that, being part of it is what really drives me every day to kind of get up, think about the future of what this should look like in this country, and be part of a great organization that has a national stance, a quality behind it, certainly a wonderful team that has been doing great work now for 8 years. We've been in the business of doing this, and I think a better every year. So it is that pride in service to others that I think drives who I am, what I'm all about, and just seeing others succeed around me. It's the cliche that I just don't want to overuse it, but it's so true with me is that I'm a better person when others around me are doing great things, and being part of that culture that allows that, puts fuel into it, and sees it thrive is really what I figured out in my life that I really am most about.
Can you tell us about this latest chapter in your life, what you're coming off of your previous position and
Yeah.
your transition into Headstrong and what that looks like?
Yeah, so I'm completing my second lap in public service in New York State government as New York's Director of Veteran Services. And it was from that perch that I gained the view of what everyone is. I got to know good organizations, both the first spin at these responsibilities and certainly the second. In the first spin, I met Headstrong, and I was drawn to the organization. At the time, there were not a lot, there were a few nonprofits popping up that were putting themselves in the business of caring for the veteran families. And Headstrong was one of them. I met Zach, Dr. Peter, and Gerard early. I took it upon myself to go see them in Manhattan because I always felt like I needed to understand what the organization really was from its people, in this case, the founders. If I was going to send people I served with their way who were in need of clinically based, mental health treatment. And so I wanted to get to know the organization, and I fell in love with it immediately. The vision of it, what it stood for, its relationship with Weill Cornell. It really was the start of my understanding that what once was thought of the purest domain of responsibility being our government, I quickly, got to learn and appreciate the role that our communities could play alongside the role of government. And Headstrong was one of those early organizations that got out of the blocks very strongly, very assertively, knew what it was doing, and I started sending friends of mine there who were in need of mental health treatment. And so I've watched the organization over the years, truthfully, and Zach knows this, and some of the teammates do. I actually, 3 years ago, thought about becoming the director when the organization found Joe Quinn, who, strangely enough, was a lieutenant of mine at West Point. And so I didn't. I stayed where I was, but certainly my responsibilities leading up to today have given me great reach and access into the best there is to serve the needs of our American veterans and their families. So Headstrong was a draw for me. It was both personal and professional. It has remained that. It will remain that. I will kind of tell everyone why it's so personal to me now. My youngest son just graduated from college, and he is now a second lieutenant in the States Army. He was an ROTC kid. He's a young engineer officer going through his basic course at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. So part of this is about ensuring the future for people like my son, Nick, is one that presents opportunities and access to care that weren't historic, and those are in community settings. And so I was drawn to this, and I'm drawn to it for both personal and professional reasons. I happen to think that evidence-based outcomes, in light of all the feel-good things, is in fact our future, and we need strong organizations that base themselves on impact around evidence, and certainly Headstrong is leading the way in that area. So,
talk about evidence-based outcomes. Tell us more about that.
yeah, sure. So, and this is, because I've held several responsibilities in the military connected sector. I've seen a lot of great ideas emerge, but in the course of emerging, few of them develop the means by which to really test what they do and analyze what they do in terms of science and scientific evidence and treatment associated with evidence. And Headstrong, from the very, very first days, built its brand and reputation around delivering evidence based treatment modalities that lead to improvements in mental health. And I think that's so important, especially when you think about what do we do with our resources in this country? Where do we make our investments? Do we want to make them in just simply things that feel good, look good, sound good? I'm of the mindset that the time has come to really hone in on those practices, those treatments that are based on scientific evidence with analysis and research behind it and peer review around those things that we now know work to improve upon the mental health of those, in our case, that we serve. So for me, this is what this chapter of my life is about. It is getting behind an organization that delivers strong evidence-based treatment modalities to improve the mental health of those who serve and their families. I can think of no more honorable a mission than to base self in an organization that does that, help lead it to its next chapter, take care of its people, and in so doing, drive the ability in this country to see more of this introduced at scale. For me, that's what this is about, Libby.
Jim,
Yeah.
I always think the personal stories are what connect people the most to the mission. And clearly, your life's work has been working with military families. On a very personal level, you talked about your son, but what is your takeaway from dealing with hundreds of different military families and the needs that they have in this space?
Well, the first thing I want people to understand is that we talk about needs as if they're singular. They're not. Unfortunately, the level of need involves co-occurrence, comorbidity, things that overlap, the interrelated nature of unpacking problems and become. And so, what I saw in our military families, and certainly in and out of uniform, was the struggle that occurs when things go bad, whether it be the loss of a family member, whether it be the loss of employment, whether it be just these wounds of war. The idea being is that I think people on the outside think that it's just one problem. But the reality is when you get inside the problem that you think you're dealing with, you start unpacking other things. And I think, Libby, what's important to me is that for our organization to do what it does best, it needs to focus on its core mission. And our core mission is to improve the mental health of those we connect with and lead them into their life for the future. But you have to have strong exit ramps alongside you. You have to have relationships that serve other needs while addressing the mental health needs of those who serve and their families. So for me, it's about relationships. When I go back in time and I think about all the problems that I had to help people deal with while serving, or certainly helping people on the other side of their military service get on with their lives, I'm always struck by the complexity of the issues they're confronted with. And certainly in the middle of this pandemic, things got a little bit more complicated with people being further isolated. The fact that we are not connecting socially as we once did, and we're finding new ways to do that. It also is a picture of ongoing struggle that was there before. It got a little bit worse during this, and certainly on the other side of it, the need to see our organization do what it does best couldn't be more pronounced. And so I think, Libby, when you start looking at problems, the tendency is to think of them in isolation. They're not isolated. They are all interrelated. You have to be able to deal with the totality, and you have to be smart enough to know what you do best. What Headstrong does best is delivering evidence-based mental health treatment to improve mental health outcomes of people. That's what we do best. And so we want that core mission to really, really what we're all about. But along the way, relationships are going to matter. I'll call them exit ramps to send people down different roads to help them solve their problems. So for me, it's about building relationships and our core mission being what we pay attention to, but always in the interest of those who are coming to us for help.
You mentioned this unprecedented time we're living in and could be living with for quite some time. And you're taking over Headstrong right as, there's some pivoting going on as
Yeah.
far as the treatment for veterans. So, how are you approaching the COVID era and the COVID era as it relates to treatment?
Yeah, and I'll draw upon my lessons from government, where we have had to reimagine how we serve the public's needs. Certainly, the idea of a brick and mortar office and people congregating in large groups, right? Those things are now part of our past. And so the pivot that I think Headstrong has made smartly and will continue to make, it's all about access, Libby, and innovating around access to care. And certainly the Headstrong model, which embraced telemental health early as a means of supporting those that no longer can come into an office, for offices are closed, or out of fear of taking public transportation or fear of being around others. If you're going to be in this business, you're going to have to offer a hybrid model. We will eventually reopen offices. Clinicians will eventually sit across from patients and people they've historically served. But for some, that will not be an option. Now, that's where Headstrong has an opportunity to innovate further. And I think there's reach and scale around telemental health. And certainly the early signs of whether it's working or not are there. It is working. People are receiving and access care over platforms such as the one we're using today in a HIPAA and PI compliant manner. And so that supports that. Libby, it also affords us greater reach than we ever had before. And when you talk about the bulk of this country, where Headstrong markets are and where we'd like to go, certainly have to be innovative in your approach to opening up access, and access can be opened up virtually. So we want to really get good at this. We want to keep the core fabric of who we are, clinician sitting across from patient, from client. We certainly want to retain that, and we want to do that so well it's not funny. But as the new era begins, we've got to become an organization that has correctly made a pivot around virtual engagement with clients. And there are a lot of people who actually like the idea of getting care from their home. They don't have the additional stressors. I certainly will tell you that appointments are dropped into quicker. We get right to the heart of the matter. And I think as an organization, we will have a model for the future that supports both virtual practice and in-person practice. And the best organizations are making that pivot, as you say, right now. And we're one of them. And we're going to continue to innovate around access to care, both in person and virtually.
On the virtual care side, obviously the reach, you can expand the reach because it's virtual. But what are the downsides that worry you, and how do you overcome that?
Yeah, well, I mean, you would like to think that the best organizations that deliver care, it's not about the organization itself. It's about the client, the patient, and the clinician, right? But there's organizational structure around us. We have an identity. And to preserve that identity, I think we're going to have to be smart on how we position it in the marketplace of care itself. And I think that as we think our way to the future, I think of a brilliant relationship with our federal partners in the VA. I think of stronger relationships with our partners in state and municipal government as a means by which we further cement our standing in the marketplace. Headstrong deserves to be the provider of choice in a community setting for those who find community care the best for them. We want to be best at that. And the challenges are, the identity of an organization that doesn't invest in brick and mortar, right? It doesn't. We don't have storefront retail facades where people walk in. We are largely, dealing with clinicians who have opened up their pre-existing practice to our clients. And I think that's important. But I worry about the kind of behind the scenes as to how we retain a brilliant identity around an organization that promotes access to high quality care connected to evidence based treatment modalities. I think we've got to be concerned with how we preserve our standing in the marketplace, make it brighter to make the brand more accessible and not lose our identity along the way. I think the second challenge is making sure that we're able to sustain the resources that go into this. Because even the models that go into philanthropic giving and raising revenue that the organization has relied upon, there's a pivot underway there too. As we think our way, around what used to be great galas and great gatherings of supporters and the physical touch that went with that, how do we ensure the viability and the expansion and the quality in a different period in our nation's history where those things are currently not being done? I'd like to think we'd return to them. I hope we will. It's going to take vaccines. It's going to take science. But in the meantime, I've got to make sure that we develop the resources to sustain the quality and keep the organizational growth and stance of going in the right direction.
Jim, it occurs to me that in this period of time, I think especially when organizations need funding and support from individuals, there may be individuals that are considering a wide range of options, especially in tough economic times, of where to give money and why. And that's going to be a big part of your mission over the next period here. And I'm just wondering if you could talk about this, urgent need for mental health care, and what your pitch would be for Headstrong.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, Libby, this is about being relevant to the times, which we really truly are. Access to mental health care is going to drive a large section of the delivery of health care for the foreseeable future. And it's going to be critically important that all the social isolation that we are now putting ourselves through has an outlet and maintains an outlet. And certainly for Headstrong, the future, I think, is bright in terms of what the country will put itself through, in my opinion, is opening up, expanding mental health services. We're part of that story. Headstrong actually is part of the story of the recovery of this country because we offer this idea that you can become well by receiving mental health treatment for those who serve and their families. It's certainly relevant to the times. So as the country wrestles with how to expand access to mental health services and treatment, which it currently is doing, we actually are part of that recovery. So as the executive director, I have to connect myself to what's going on in this country, position the organization to be part of the solution that is so vital to people getting on with lives. And we are that story. We are that story for the military connected population in this country. With the right resources, it's quite possible that we're more than that. But we have to stick to what we were founded to do and do it well. And that is to address the mental health needs of those who serve and their families. But we are actually part of a great solution that is emerging in this country. Our organizations and others like us, by banding together and offering ourselves as the best in class care that we can deliver, are going to be the most successful organizations in this era of a post-COVID-19 world. We have a brilliant future around that. The pitch that I have to make is we are a partner to government and a partner to many to doing this best. And I'm perfectly capable, and I look forward to the challenges of getting in front of people, thinking about making investments in mental care, because Headstrong, with its strong track record of performance, of delivering outcomes and impact, is one of the best brands out there to come out of this COVID-19 era, positioned well to address the needs for the foreseeable future and beyond. And this is a great organization. It's the right time, the right organization, with the right leadership, the right resources to begin making a bigger dent in improving upon the mental health of those we serve and beyond.
Jim, it's pretty obvious to everybody that you're an Army veteran, given that you just put that clearly, plainly, and forcefully with no preparation. That was incredible. Well, if you'll allow me, Jim, I'd love to do a lightning round. These are scary, but I think everybody, when someone takes over an organization, we always want to know kind of some fun details about you. So I just thought I would ask you a couple questions to get to know you a little better. So, obviously you work hard and work all the time and are a very busy person, but what sort of things do you and your family enjoy to do when you're not working and serving the country?
Yeah, so I like to run by myself, no music. I'm this quiet runner, gets out there, and I do it for my mind. I used to do it for time, Libby. People need to know that way. That's how I used to be wired. Now I just do it for clearing my mind. I'm an avid outdoorsman. Love the Adirondacks, ski in the winter. Got a small, tiny boat up on a lake in upstate New York that we get out on. So for me, it's the simple things in life. It's exercise, it's the quality of life with my children. New grandparent, so there's a new generation of McDonoughs, being introduced to the world. So for me, it's time spent with them, sharing of myself with them, Libby. But keeping this to a lightning round, the great outdoors, love the Adirondacks, time spent with family. Looking forward to being actually a grandparent.
How would your kids describe you?
Driven, yeah,
Okay.
driven. And I'd like to think along the way, someone who makes room for a lot.
That's great. What about your employees and the people you've managed? What would they say about you as a leader?
I'd like to think they felt loved by me, because I genuinely uh, want people to feel loved by this type of leadership. I think it's look. This is a crazy world we're in right now, and I made a vow to myself, and I'm not a New Year's resolution guy, and I've always been kind, but I consciously approached this year with a phrase I'll call conscious kindness, and for me, living up to that every day means praising and thanking those that I get to work alongside, that I'm part of. And I think for those who I've worked with in the past, they would say I'm fun. I'm kind of goofy, funny. Try to introduce humor to keep it light, but clearly develop a course and bring people to the realization that we can achieve it and do great things. So I think they'd say I love them. I cared for them. And I'm certainly the kind of guy who believes in empowering others to do great work and just watch it unfold and make an adjustment here and there along the way. But a true love for people.
That's great. And I think finally, who have you looked up to in your career that you might be able to share with us, or someone you're looking up to now for leadership and inspiration?
Yeah, my mom. She raised two boys on her own, and I certainly think the person I've become today is a tribute to my mom. My parents were divorced early. My mom had the wisdom to send me to a very tough Catholic school, and my brother, so we didn't become hooligans, as I kind of think she might have thought we could. But she certainly is the source of my strength as I look back on the person I've become. God, she was an amazing woman ahead of her time. Raising two boys like wolves in the 70s. She was a head nurse in an emergency room. She wasn't around much because of work, but she invested in her children. And I'm thankful for what she presented me. There have been a couple more people along the way that I've served with. There certainly is a great friend of mine, retired from the Army, a guy named Howard Bromberg. He was a three-star general. I served with him for many years in many capacities. And he was a lot like me. We were people first, mission always, care for those around you, and at your own expense. That's what I thought early. You do this at your own expense. It's not for everybody, but certainly I subscribe to that ethos as a person.
Well, I know it's been great getting to know you over this session and over the last couple of weeks. And I know the board at Headstrong is just really excited for your leadership and what you're going to do with the organization. Is there anything else that I haven't asked that you would like to add?
I'll just kind of close it out with a couple of additional thoughts, Libby, if I could. I think it's important for everyone to realize that what people might think about addressing the needs of who serve their country and their families, it is the work of our communities that matters most. And I define that with both a small and a large C, lowercase and a capital C. I mean, this community based role that the nation has got to play in helping people who serve their country get on with their lives couldn't be more important. And for the longest time, we thought this was the domain of governments, that governments have a response, and truthfully, they do, but they don't do it in isolation. We join the service, we come out, we return to a community. We grew up in, the one we are employed in, or just one where we want to live. That all takes place in a community. And the fabric of our communities is really what's going to play a growing role in addressing the needs of those who serve in their families. So I want people to understand that as we think our way through the future of care and veteran services, the need to integrate what goes on in our communities more strongly with what our government does is really a big policy area for the future. We all have a role to play, as we see every day. So I just want people to know that I'm going to spend my time in a community, working with my partners, developing the best approach to addressing the mental health needs of those who serve and their families. And we're gonna do this in the best possible ways wherever we can. And so I think it's just critical to understand that stop thinking this is just the exclusive responsibility of our government. This is all of us. And I think Headstrong, as an organization, on the backside of this pandemic, is going to be brilliantly situated to contribute in a community setting to the mental health and well-being of those who serve in their families. I love the organization. The people are great, Libby. This is a strong team. They're phenomenal. I've never been around, I think, a more energetic bunch of people. Really small organization, which puts its muscle behind the clinicians. So it is an empowerment model. But in my interview phase, and certainly the first 24 hours of my time at the helm, I feel the energy already, Libby. So I just want to say thank you to everyone, for those who support us, for those who are thinking about supporting us, for those who we touch, for those who we have yet to touch. I welcome the opportunity to serve and take care of the people in this organization. And it's both an honor and a privilege, to be here today.
Well, thank you so much. I've enjoyed everything you've said. And again, we're very excited to have you at the helm.
Thanks, Libby. I wish you the best and appreciate you doing this for us.